Hello, I'm Stuart Preston, and this is the Stone Ape Reports, where I have conversations with those who have changed their lives with the power of psychedelics. In this episode, I had the honor of speaking with Guy Murray. Guy suffered from C-PTSD, or complex PTSD, from trauma experienced in childhood and in war in Afghanistan. That led him to psilocybin and LSD for help. His story is an important one, and is being told in the documentary film Breaking Through PTSD with Psychedelics. So let's hear from Guy. All right, Guy. Well, thank you, first of all, for coming here on the Stone Ape Reports. I really appreciate it. You've got a pretty powerful story here, and so I'm grateful to you to come on here and share that with everybody out there. So first of all, thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. It's really nice to hear. It's nice to be here. Hello to all your listeners. I am now one of them. I've been going through your podcast. It's
nice.
very nice. It's very nourishing.
Good. Excellent. Thank you. I appreciate that. So I saw your story. You are the subject of a documentary called Breaking Through PTSD with Psychedelics, which obviously caught my eye, and you described, I think almost a little more in depth than most people do, that how trauma started in childhood, and then you ended up having a, unfortunate, heroic experience, Afghanistan, and coming back with some PTSD, and actually C-PTSD, which I guess is complex. So maybe you can tell us the difference at some point here, but kind of tell us your story. Like how did the trauma get built up? What were you dealing with? What was life like? How did you end up coming then to psychedelics? And then after that, we'll kind of dive into your experiences and how things have changed. But give us a little bit of background on what was going on with you.
All right, but you have to pull me out of any rabbit holes. I've got ADD, so my mind jumps around. I'll try and keep it in a nice, constant flow, but yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, so I joined the army in 2008. I thought I was just, gonna sign up, serve my country, and it was a very sort of obvious route for me because I always had a sense of adventure. And I believed that, it was completely my own my decision, my choice, my free will. And I went off to training. I found training quite difficult initially, just because I was around some rowdy blokes. I'd always been a sensitive kid, and it was a bit of a shock to the system. Like a lot of my friends that I made there and still in contact with today, they came from some pretty testy backgrounds, to say the least. And I was kind of like this in-between person the whole time. Not quite an officer. So I joined as a non-commissioned officer. So just, the lowest rank. I wanted to work my way up. I was like I always thought like that. Like you should get to know the bottom and then get promoted upwards.
Good.
Yeah, and I had an amazing time by the end of training. I loved it. I loved the power that came to me from getting physically fit, from the weapons that get put into your hand. But it was always a sense of like a game to me. Like it never truly sort of sunk in that, I was killing a real enemy. And it was a year after I joined up at the age of 18, just turned 19 at the start of training. So I went out to Afghanistan just around my 20th birthday in October. And yeah, when I got out to Afghanistan, my name got put forward as being someone who was quite good with the old metal detector.
Wow.
Well, it's kind of sounds like a nice compliment until you realize you're going to be one of the boys walking 5 to 10 meters out in front. Actually, I say that our number twos, our people like protecting our backs, they didn't really care about the rules. They would be right up on my back with me, going to search for these devices. Yeah. They were just as willing to put themselves in harm's way as us boys with the metal detector. So, but yeah, we were literally
stressful. I know when I was in the army, I trained on those and removing mines. It had nothing to do with my job, but I thought to myself, I hope I never have to do this.
It's a lot of pressure. It's pressure.
It's a lot of pressure.
The people who are behind you, they're your brothers, and if you miss a device, if you don't step on it, which is scary enough, like someone else is going to step on it.
Right.
And unfortunately, that happened, and people have taken their lives in the guilt and the shame afterwards. So,
I bet.
Yeah, survivor's guilt, man. Imagine. So yeah, that was kind of put in my hands, and then, I was out on daily patrols. We're in Helmand, Sangin Valley, so it's a pretty leery place. We got told it was going to be very calm, but actually, statistically, it was dubbed the bloodiest tour of Afghanistan. 1 in 4 people in my job role handling the metal detector on that tour were killed. So obviously, I feel very lucky to have made it back. And again, there used to be a little bit of guilt that came with coming back, I guess. So I had that experience 6 months, halfway through the tour. February 25th is coming up. I was watching this fierce battle from a sentry position, so I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything about this battle that was going on. And I was watching down the road, these lads were getting ambushed, and one of them was my friend Martin. And then I was just watching him through these binoculars, there with him in the battle. And I just saw a round hit the sand in front of him, then hit his weapon, and then the final one just straight through his face. And then,
oh my God.
Yeah. And like, if I close my eyes now, I can go to that memory like quite easily. It's vivid. It's in my brain. But as we'll get into it in a bit, I now don't have the emotions attached to that memory, which is nice. So it's like it's just a distant dream, but I still obviously very much respect his memory and what he did that day. And it was all saving a friend who had just been shot through the back, actually. Poor old Andy. But he survived. And then, and then I guess the hardest bit was after that, it was in Peter Levine's book. I can't remember the title now. Something the tiger I can't remember. It's about somatic injury, holding trauma in your body. And he talks about, it's like when a bird flies into the window and you can tell it's not dead. It's there like breathing heavily in your hand. And then just out of nowhere, they suddenly just switch back on and fly away. But it was like for about 2-3 hours, I was stuck in this stunned state of I couldn't do anything. I was in shock. I just remember just being like, it was like there was a ringing through my head, like, zing. And I was just like, and the first time that my body loosened up is when I went to the toilet and I forced myself to take a piss, right? And then I suddenly realized I had control over my body. And then that's when the tears came, and oh my God, his girlfriend, like I've met his mum, like I've met this, like he's met my mum, like what's my mum going to think when she sees this on the news? Because I won't be able to tell her before that I'm okay. I'm just all the like swirling and just like, I just wanted to be sick. And at that point, a corporal came up and he saw me like bawling my eyes, like grabbed me and like pretty much put me up against the wall. And he was like, you can't break down now. If you break down now, that's the end of you. Like you won't be able to finish this tour, and we need you here. And I just remember being like, this is unfair. That's my best mate. Just watch him get shot through the face. You need no time for mourning. And I stomped up to my to Mr. Foltzan, one of the bosses. I was there like, I want to be on the plane. I want to repatriate him, and I want to do this. I want to do that. And he was like, well, guy, he was a valor man. He was we've got fewer and fewer of you on the ground. Like, you've got to stay out here. And it just all sunk in, and I just had to bottle it up. I became very dissociative. When I spoke to my mum on the sat phone, which was rare, she could just hear my my voice like disappearing. And I think that was very, very hard for her and very hard for the rest of the family. But I can
only imagine.
But I made it back, which is nice.
Yes. And what was it like when you came back? I mean, that's because you alluded to the fact that now you've kind of separated the emotions from the visual memories that you still have. When you came back, that wasn't the case, right? When you came back, all this was still very much alive inside of you.
9 years, I think I sat with that feeling.
Oh my gosh.
Like genuinely, like 9 years, like of not being able to move on. of ruminating and feeling like those memories had defined me and made me the person who I was. Like, that's what I thought. Like, I could only see the world through this distorted, damaged lens. But when I first came back, you know, like, you're welcome back with flags. You get the hero's welcome. You're marching through the streets. Everything's
like, it must have felt surreal.
Yeah, it felt like watching an old wartime movie when they're marching through the streets after they've just saved Europe. Apart from, when everything started to unravel, I was like, what did we save? Like, we didn't save our friends. Like, what's happening in Afghanistan? And then, God, that's another sort of rabbit hole to go in. But for a while, the army keeps you moving. Like, I jumped out of an airplane however many times. I did loads more adventure training, like all these things to try and bring you back down. But in between those moments, we were excessively binge drinking and being, you know, idiots and sometimes even violent and getting arrested. It all sort of built to a point where some of us started taking MDMA in our rooms.
Just on your own, just a thought occurred to you to take it to just was it kind of like an escape?
Well, I think a lot of people have taken drugs before they've joined the military. In fact, research shows that that's most likely to be true because a lot of people come from broken sort of family systems where substance abuse is rife. So a lot of people join the military to escape that. And obviously some people, like, if these feelings get too much and get too overwhelming, of course they're going to revert back to this thing which has managed their symptoms in the past. It wasn't all the time, and it was a few of us, and I'd never name names because it's deemed such a dishonorable thing in the army. There's no warning. There might be a warning now, but there's no warning. You'd just be chucked out on your ass, dishonorably discharged, like the day after you came back from Afghan. Like, it's scary.
That's just wrong.
Yeah, it's nasty.
Nasty. Yeah.
But yeah, even so I came back, I did a promotional cadre, like got up a couple of ranks, one rank, telling a lie there, don't know why I had to lie. And it was always my intention to transfer and become an officer, and I went through the process, and one day I got put in front of the commanding officer, the big cheese, the guys in charge of the regiment. And he's like, right, you've passed, this interview, you're probably ready to go off, blah, blah, blah. And he's at it just, it's so important to know what you're doing these things for. And what happened next was, I doubt he even knew it, but he collapsed my house of cards. He like flicked the top couple of cards by role playing with me. He goes, okay, so you come back off this coach from Afghanistan, you get off, you're faced by the media, and some little media asshole asks you this really obscure question. Who were the people, what were the nationalities, and who were the people that flew the planes into the Twin Towers?
And
I was just there like, I was like, and he was like, so you've been to Afghanistan and now you've come back and you haven't got an answer. And I was just fuck. I was just like, oh no, like, why did you go? And then I got out of that office, and as you can, like, because my this little ADD brain, which I didn't even know was unique in a different way, just started ruminating and digging deeper and wanting to find the answers to these questions. It was like each segment of that house of card was falling down and knocking the other segment over, and it was just collapsing from level to level to level until I was like left with nothing. And I was like, oh shit, you got to get out of this. Like, you don't want to become an officer. You don't want to put Martin in that same position, like a young boy, 19. Like, that's not what you want. Like, it's the opposite. I was like, yeah, time to bug out. And because my mental health had deteriorated so much, I'd gone to the medical officer, and oh man, this is, a lot of therapists out there, if you're listening, this was some of the worst advice. I told her I was close to tears. I was thinking about my friend Martin a lot. She goes, you've just been promoted now, Corporal Murray. It's just demotivation in the work role. You need to keep on going. And like I got up and she was like, "You're a lance corporal now. You'll figure it out."
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, and that's I went and took my first, well, probably my only ever sort of like overdose. But I say that very, you know, people listening, I say that kind of lightly. It was just because it was tramadol, so it was an opioid, and it was just like I was like a smudge on a work surface, and I was just trying to rub myself out of existence. Like I had a great quote the other day that it's a moving away of life rather than a move towards death. Like I was scared of death. I was, you know, like every time I saw death, Martin's death, like I was paralyzed by it. So, and I didn't want to, like it scared me. I couldn't take my life because it scared me so much. So it was like I was trapped in like this weird existence, like in limbo. And yeah, I had to get out, and I left the country, and luckily the army took us on some amazing ski trips where I was dancing on tables, downing rosé and snogging beautiful girls.
Right.
And I just met a girl out there, and she's like, "Yeah, you can come live here. You can do, you know, you can work a winter season out here in Val d'Isère." And luckily, I had some nice people around me, a friend, and she was like, "Just come out, like, just leave that behind you." And I did. I left, still under my military contract. I left 3 months, like before I was meant to leave. No one batted an eyelid, had a clue where I was. I played the system, told one person where I was and another person a different story. No duty of care. But I'd done it. You know, I created that situation. I played the game. Like I knew I could see how to do it. Like it's no one's fault. It's just like playing mum against dad.
Yeah.
And then 4 years it took me before I came back home. I was drinking, partying, using recreational drugs. I was addicted to socializing, like being around people, always having to be happy. But unfortunately, it kept me in massive extremes of euphoria and massive highs, like snowboarding and drugs and drinking. And the moment I left that feeling, that situation, I would plummet. My self-esteem was so low. And it was just turbulent. I was probably just this little ball of chaos for anyone to have to endure. Just, you know, people call it bipolar or whatever they, you know, whatever you want to call it. That's what they call it now. But it's just my inability to calm myself down, to sit with the pain, to sit with my emotions and bring myself back to like emotional equilibrium. I just couldn't do it. It seemed boring to me.
Yeah, you had to get back to that manic phase.
Manic, yeah, I had to stay there because anything lower than that was too painful and scary.
Yeah, Jesus.
Yeah, and then it took a beautiful, exciting dancer girlfriend to. We ended up moving to Dubai together, and she just saw I was like this shell, just following her around, living off the excitement that her life brought to me. And yeah, she said he had no drive or ambition and broke it off. And I went back home with my tail between my legs and, you know, and then that's when I started watching TED Talks on how to unlearn this sort of way of thinking, this depression, and saw Ros Watts deliver a wonderful thing on psilocybin and a TED Talk on psilocybin and depression. And I was like, hey, like drugs have really worked for me to like be expressive. Like, I don't feel like I'm consumed by drugs. I just feel like I use them to communicate and get close to people and all those things that I can't usually do when I'm sober. It was very much an attachment thing to me. And it was a way of like other people could help me regulate my emotions. It's why I had a mild sort of addiction to sex, because women are just such amazing caregivers, and you go and lay with them in bed and they bring you, I mean, they bring a lot to you, not just this, but they were bringing me back down to a nice, calm, transcendent, comforting experience. So I started university, and at the same time I was doing all this reading and research and into the literature, and and I went and I went foraging for mushrooms in Scotland in the Highlands.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I was looking through all the guides and you know, like reading stuff that Paul Stamets and people would put out there, and I was searching for so long in like the thick of the woods in the forest, But in the daytime, I was actually working at a coffee stall with my friend Ash. And so all during the day, or in the evening, sorry, I'd go into the woods to try and find these mushrooms, and I couldn't find them. And one day I was working in the coffee stall, which was based in this big open field outside of a whiskey distillery for people to get their coffee off the coach. And I've just got my head in my hand, just, dreaming of mushrooms. And the skies literally opened up, man, like, which is rare in Scotland. And the sun came out for a good couple of hours, and within that couple of hours it dried the top of these mushrooms that were in this field that I was working in. And the field that I'd been working in for 2-3 weeks without finding any mushrooms was littered with psilocybin mushrooms.
Wow.
Liberty caps. Yeah, like, you couldn't write it. You literally couldn't write it.
Wow.
And then for like the next 2 months I was just walking in nature, either with a friend or by myself, or in my tent with like a little lamp and a notepad, and just really trying to get to the crux of like my issues and like how I didn't like myself or love myself. And I began to see that my thoughts were fueling the emotional turmoil that was like inside me. So I connected with it, and I made myself a promise in Scotland that I would just start to engage with that side of myself and be more expressive and open. And yeah, I went back to university and kind of told everyone what had happened up in Scotland, and I thought everything was okay. But it wasn't enough. I kind of went back to the same environment that I'd kind of, and it wasn't a bad environment. It's just, I don't know. I just remember I had an argument with my mum and then my sister, and the same sort of narrative. Like, if you've got ADD, or anyone's got ADD, you've probably been called lazy, selfish, arrogant. It's just because it's very hard to think outwardly when you're constantly thinking about your internal state. So you do things to kind of protect yourself. And I just had these sort of same arguments, and I sort of realized that I was kind of like invalidating my sort of existence in a way. And my dad rang me, who I don't speak to all that much. We do now, which is really nice. And he told me I had pulmonary fibrosis, which is a degenerative disease of the lungs. And just coming back from Scotland, just these things just kept layering up and building up again. And I was like, no. I was like, I thought I got it. I thought I went deep enough. And I was kind of at this crossroads again. And I was like, I can't go to my family. This isn't about my girlfriend. Like, I just met a lovely partner of mine. It's not about her. She can't bring you anything. Like, this has got to be more work by yourself. And luckily, a friend had reached out on Facebook a few months ago and is like, come out, man. I've got a pretty good method with some LSD, and I'll guide you through some things and see if it helps. Me and my partner out here, and we'll look after you for 3 or 4 days.
Nice.
Yeah. So I jumped on a plane and went over to Barcelona. The trip in was some of the strongest winds, rains, and storm that I've ever had on a plane.
Oh my gosh.
It was so typical. Like, even like the air stewardess, they were sat down, like, looking at each other, smiling. And it means it's a bit hairy, but you've got to go through the storm, right? We know this.
Yeah. You had to pass through that.
Yeah. So yeah, I had my biggest breakthrough out there in Barcelona, and man, it took 10 hours like to get to the breakthrough, and my guide had almost given up. I had some pretty strong defenses around me. I'd built up my iron fortress with all these stories, all these victim stories, all this suffering. And he was just sitting there nodding and smiling along as I had my head in his partner's lap, like, yes, guy. Yep. You know this story? Yep. Okay. And I was there like, fuck, seems like he's waiting for something. like what is he waiting for? And it was like he was the voice on the devil's shoulder. And I was trying to climb out of this room constantly by telling these stories. And then eventually I just came to be like, okay, like, what is it? Like, what are you trying to tell me? And he took me for this walk, and him and his partner, and he took me to outside this chapel. It's really weird. It's like they're not weird. The setting was, they were looking after this big chateau in Barcelona, and there was a chapel in the grounds, and they had the key to it. So we're sitting outside this chapel, and he's like, Guy, like, you know, there's a very holy place in here. Do you want to go inside? And I was like, you know, I'm on LSD at the time, a triple dose, by the way, like,
oh, big dose,
400 mix,
yeah,
or almost 400 mix. And I'm like, yeah, I want to go in this chapel. Yeah, like I want to find this holiness or whatever it is. And he was like, you're gonna have to, you know, like be true to yourself. And I was like, I am true to myself, man. Like I've told you everything I know. And he's like, you're not going there. Like, where is it that you need to go? Like, what is it you've come here to tell me? And I was like, I don't know. And have you ever seen Good Will Hunting?
yes.
You know the scene where Robin stands up and faces Will, and he just looks at him and he goes like, "It's not your fault."
Yeah.
And then Will's like, Matt, yeah, I know it's not my fault. The guy looked at me and is like, you know, your love, like me and my partner, we love you. And I was like, yeah, I know. Like, yeah, you love people. Cool, I get it. And then he said, no, Guy, like I love you. And I was there like, oh man, this man's attacking me. Like he's attacking me. And I was there like, yeah, cool. I was like, yeah, okay. And then like he came closer to me. Is that like I love you? And I was there like, man, I'm not gay. And he was there like, Guy, this isn't about being gay. I was like, I don't get it. I don't get it. And like he hugged me and he was like, it's okay. And I was like, I know. And then he was like, okay, right, it's not going anywhere. I'll show you the inside of the chapel. And he showed me the inside of the chapel, and it was completely bare. But what he didn't know, inside my head, I was there like, huh, like he can just love me unconditionally. Like he barely knows me, but he's given me this love, like him and his partner are. And I was like, and I can't even accept it, because I think that to accept it, that I am gay.
Huh.
And I was there like, that is fundamentally wrong. I was like, that's the same hate that causes discrimination. And
yeah.
And like, that's the hate which fuels like, you know, like intersocietal like conflict. And just because my defenses were so down, I was there like, wow, you can't be loved by men. Like that's big. And I was like, it means that all these people that you grew close to in Afghanistan, and they grew close to you, like you grew over this bond, and then you come back, yet you can't be close to one another enough to put your arms around each other and heal. But you could with the MDMA, and you could with this. And yeah, we went back into the room that he was doing. We took the LSD in, which was nice, and incense on and by a fire. And him and his partner sat up on like the sofa, and I was on this like mattress on the floor, and it just broke inside me.
Oh.
I just felt unconditional love for myself because of this realization. And it was basically like he had whispered like a secret in my ear, and I was like, I get it now. Like, I get it. I've never loved myself because I've been intergenerational trauma. Like my uncle was killed when I was a kid. I came out and I was a security blanket for everyone. Like I was loved conditionally. I was never like, not to say that my mum's love or dad's love or whatever wasn't lovely. It was like part of it was tainted, and I'd never internalized love in like this way for myself and attached properly to people, because I had never felt unconditional love. And at that point, I was just like this broken small creature on this mattress, crying and laughing and rolling around in happiness, like this feeling that I've never felt before. And it just felt like my heart was like completely open, and there was this like laser beam of universal interconnected cosmos love, like cosmic love pouring into my heart. And just the epiphanies, it was like someone split a happy atom in my brain. And you've got to remember, this is 10 hours into a trip. Like the peak experience had gone. So it's I when they talk about the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost, I'm not religious for the listeners, but I like the symbology behind any religion, because I think there's great power in the stories they tell. When they talk about the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost, when you talk about Father God, you are, everyone has the power of God within them. You have this power to love yourself unconditionally and other people. Jesus, he is the other loves you. And then love, like the Holy Spirit. If you align these three things up, like during a trip, you have this transcendent, amazing experience where you know, like John O'Donoghue says, like it's a breaking dawn within your heart that like allows you to see the good in everyone and just understand that people have had fucking hard traumatic upbringings, and that's where this hate comes from, and that's what fuels wars, and that's what allows kids to put cadet uniforms on and want to join the army and live in the reflection of their father's eyes and go back out to war. And then the father who was in the army then produces a son who's in the army, gets killed in the army, more hate, like more trauma. And it's just, you just see it all unfold in front of you and you're like, oh man, I've got to do something about this now.
Yeah.
But you're never free of that thought from then on. You're never too far away from the path. You know now that the joy, the love, everything, it's yours. It's divinely yours. Like no one can touch it. Like people can certainly try and inflict their pain on you, but this is hard. And this, you know, the Dalai Lama says it, like pain is inevitable, but suffering was choice. And I realized that was my choice, the way I was seeing the world through this damaged victim lens. And in that moment, I was like, there's no point living like that anymore. And I went outside and I just threw up black bile. And like the tears were like dripping into this black sick. And I was just there like, there goes my trauma. There goes my big trauma. Like the death of Martin has just come out of me and it's on the floor. And I'm going to have to kick this dog away because it's coming to lick it up. That dog doesn't want to be possessed. Anyway.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And yeah, I came back. I left that trauma, that sick in Barcelona, got on a plane. And my life hasn't been the same since. My self-esteem has started raising. I can talk to you like this on a podcast. I could do this on the news if I wanted to. I have done it on the news. Like it's just pure truth and acceptance and vulnerability and forgiveness all wrapped up in
how
one.
long ago was that you came back?
January last year.
January last year. So it's a little over a year.
Yeah.
You've been in this new state of mind.
Yeah. And I've tripped since, and I've, you know, like I'm an advocate for the rescheduling of drugs to Schedule 2 so that we can research them efficiently. I can't sit here and not tell anyone to do what I did because moral development, like people's like, well, you've got a moral obligation to like warn people of like the things that can go wrong, which I think is true. I mean, but hundreds of thousands of people do take psychedelics every weekend with, you know, without guidance. But I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm saying that I didn't have a choice because the UK government can't put their stupid egos to rest.
Right.
And like research this and make it a thing so I don't have to go crawling with my hands and knees through a forest to find some mushroom to overcome my past traumas and have that post-traumatic growth from it as well to help now tell my story and educate other people and be like, yo man, like maybe you just want to like love yourself a little bit with this drug and see how you feel after. Like, yeah, maybe.
Yeah, it's hard not to. If you were, you know, somebody came to you and said, you know, hey guy, what should I do? Should I go forage for mushrooms in Scotland or buy a coffee shop? You know, what's some advice you would give them in terms of making sure they do this in a safe, harm-free way and get the benefits from it?
Yeah. So first of all, I'd say that, remember, I was studying psychology at the time, which was hard. But so I had a lot of support around me. I had institutional support, not that they condoned me going off to find mushrooms and take it, but you know, the people who were teaching me were counselors and therapists and trauma therapists. So I felt very safe that anything that would come up, I could discuss. And I also had I had beautiful friends around me. This one part of growing up is being able to step into circles and groups of people who are just lovely, nice people. And because I never had ties to one spot, I never had a home in one area. I was always moving around. I find it quite easy to step into into places which are nourishing and good for me now, whereas before I wasn't making those decisions. So I would say social support is so key, like having like lovely people around you. I would, go on the website. There's a lot of harm reduction websites now. Like, make sure you're not, if you're of a neurodiverse mind, like, does that come with like voices and stuff like that? I don't know. Like, it's hard. Like, I don't want to ever exclude anyone from it. It's so hard for me not to. But
yeah, but there's some things that people should just, like you said, look at the harm reduction websites. From everything from Zendo to Dance Safe.
Yeah.
To see, make sure if they're taking any kind of a medicine, talk to their doctor. That there are contraindications, and some of them can be deadly. Some of them can just, reduce the trip.
Yeah, exactly. It would be fairly stupid not to do your due diligence and go and research them. And then, don't do them alone. Just there's like I said, you need the alignment of you, yourself, and other. Like if you study interpersonal neurobiology, there's something that happens when you enter the embrace of another human being. We have these skin receptors, which then release oxytocin. Oxytocin is a molecule we should really be looking at. Like, serotonin, great. But for me, that just allows you to transcend your attachment style. It means that you, instead of like, if you used to be avoidant and you didn't want to be hugged or touched, in these windows of opportunity, you can put yourself, hopefully, they're a trained person, or they're your friend, or they're a family member. You can put yourself in their embrace and then feel those neurochemicals come down through your body, and that's the healing property of them. Like, we're social primates, that's what we need. And we just live in this hyper autonomous world where we've got walls between all our neighbors. We don't even know our neighbors anymore because the housing market is so stupid. You have to move like hundreds of miles away from your friends just to find a house that you can afford. It's like loss of community. It's like, that's what you're trying to get back to, yet you never know it. And and in COVID, you can probably feel it more than ever. That's why I moved house. I moved into a big shared warehouse with 4 people who can probably hear every word that I'm saying right now, who I trip with as well, like they and they're beautiful, wonderful souls, and like everyone's just really coming together, and it's like we've really found ourselves a nice little nest. And what it's doing for me is just, I'm allowing myself to just sit comfortable and make good, rational, purposeful decisions. And like, when you haven't had a place that you felt that you could call home before, it's everything. It's nice.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I want to give you a chance to tell us about the documentary, but before that, you're here on the podcast, you've done interviews, this documentary is going to be coming out. As a result of being open about this, have you had to deal with any stigma? Like you mentioned how your family came at you about your ADD. Have they come at you about the stigma? Have other people in university, friends, anybody come at you, and have you experienced any of that stigma from being open about psychedelics?
Yes.
Oh, tell us about
it. So I just quickly say, because if my family listen to this, I don't feel like they've come at me. It's just, and the same with when talking about psychedelics, it's all a place of not knowing and not taking the time to go and find out. And like, we feel this in family systems when a parent might invalidate the work that you do because I'm against drugs. Like my family comes, my dad's a policeman, but he's really come on board. He's a retired policeman now, worked in proper high up and stuff. My mum was a teacher, retired now. So you got these two very archetypal positions, which are very anti-drugs. So of course, the whole life has been about keeping drugs out of schools. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, let's hear me like preaching a completely different message. And, drugs to people are just like a whole brand in itself. It's like people are just anti-drugs without unpacking what that actually means. And it's because a lot of people get stuck in the moral development phase of legality, and they, but there comes a point where you realize that we can respect laws, but we can view them from a place above them. So we can stick to them, but we can challenge them, because otherwise, you'd never escape draconian laws, which are not good for the community. So yeah, I had a lot of backlash when I came back from the Barcelona trip. I told my mum what had happened, and she looked at me nervously, and she was like, "LSD is in what the hippies used to take in the 70s." Right. I was like, "Yeah, those ones." She's like, "I don't want to hear about it."
She just didn't want to. She's like, "I don't even want to hear about it. Don't tell me."
Nah. It's too painful. Funny. It's like everything I'm talking about now is just too painful for some family members. They want you to be that kid that you were because you're a stable thing for them. Like, my middle name is Alan. My uncle was killed the year before I was born, Alan. Like, I am the reflection of, like, it's so hard for anyone. Like, no one wants you to change out of the image that they've created of their child. Like, people are so, like, they want them to, like, reflect them. But no, like, we should, like, spiritual maturity is about allowing that kid to validate every feeling, allow them to be who they want to become, and empowering them. Like, the moment you start saying, "Oh, well, that doesn't fit my lens," that child has to then repress and internalize parts of your damage, of your trauma, and it's hard.
That's an excellent point.
Yeah. And my university, I've now emailed them 5 times about starting a psychedelic society. I've emailed them about this documentary, Breaking Through, which is coming out, and the event that's being hosted by Psychedelic Society. Big up Psychedelic Society, by the way. And no one will listen. And every lecture that we talk about any mental disorder, if I bring up psychedelics, because they shut down the conversation so far. Like, I've had a mentor say, a tutor say, "Oh, what, is in shamans?"
Really?
In front of people. And you're like, man, like, this is meant to be a university. Like, come on. Like, oh, well, there's not much research to suggest. There's not much. Tell me the research that you've looked at. Oh, well, I haven't actually looked at any research. And you just say, like, wow. Like, like, wow. Like, when does the student outgrow the maturity of the tutor? Like, it's shameful. It's shameful. And, like, this is such a pivotal moment in history where we need to make sure that the voices come from our younger generation, the diversity. Like, we need to know where the pain and the suffering is coming from. We need to make sure that the businesses are started with this in mind, and they're not just millionaire tycoons who just want to come and commercialize it and take it away from its indigenous roots. Like, but I can't even have that discussion. I don't even have a platform. So when I start mentioning it in the chat on the side of our Zoom talk, which, gets overlooked by a lot of people that are like, "Oh, well, Guy, it's not, it's not a treatment for everything." I'm like, I know it's not a treatment for everything, but it is a treatment for emotional trauma that can go back to the neuroplasticity of when you were a child, and therefore you can get the unconditional love of others and the healing that you need, which will, show you the light a little bit. Right. And I'm not saying it's for everyone. It's painful and it's hard and it's a drug. And if like Neo in the Matrix, when Trinity stops him from getting out the car and is like, "Neo, aren't you bored of going down that same road every time?" This is when people come to psychedelics. Like, they know there's a way. Like, you just got to see through the system, and like, that's why it's daunting for people. They don't want to give up the system, because I'm not saying give up on the society system. I love our society. There's bits I really don't like. I'm not anti-society. I'm saying there's a way to be part of this society, but actually redirect your attention to what really matters and counts. And ultimately, that's our environment and social equality. Like, that's just raising the standards of living, so people don't come into this world with conditional love.
Yeah. Well, I sure hope they start listening to you.
But I think that ship has sailed. I've annoyed enough people in the lectures, but it's hard because I get the backlash of all the students who know nothing about it, who just said, like, "Oh, well, just shut up about it," or blah blah blah, and it disempowers my voice. It's so frustrating. It's horrible. And then because now, by the uni not giving me a platform, can you see how it then turns the people I'm talking to about it? I turn them against psychedelics.
Yeah,
because I'm just the annoying kid talking about psychedelics.
Yeah, and it's amazing the backlash in the settings. I do some stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
You know, I was in a
brave man.
I don't know about that. But I attended a panel discussion about mental health among comedians. And I brought up the question. I was like, well, what do you guys think about, psychedelics and working with mental health? The entire panel, much to my immense surprise, were like, oh, drugs are bad. And I was just like, what? Yeah. Of all the places in the world, I thought a group of comedians talking about drugs, they would go, oh, yeah, those have really helped me, or we like those, or we need to study those. But they just all shut it down. And it just blew me away.
Well, think about it. Think about why they're, like, no offense to them, and I'm not saying this is true, but this might be true. Why is it for some people that they want to get up on a stage and make everyone laugh and feel happy? Like going back to Robin Williams, he killed himself, right, but he looked like he was one of the happiest men on the stage. But maybe sometimes it's comedians who need that medicine the most, like
they do. We are miserable people.
Yeah. Well, you know what I mean? Sound like it.
Yeah, it's we are neurotic and miserable and angry. I mean, but these were people who had supposedly dealt with their mental challenges and their mental health issues. And so I just was like, okay, these guys will be way open to this, because I know a lot of comedians are doing acid so they can write, and they smoke marijuana so they can be creative.
Yeah.
I just was like, it's just one of those things, just like you're talking to people in the university, like you're supposed to be on the cutting edge. You're supposed to be advancing knowledge, and here you are pushing back on this idea.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of triggered a thought in my mind there, like in my family system, because of just the way things were. And there was there's people unknowingly, they were, this trauma was my nan was depressed, and like kind of like because of losing her son and stuff, like I became the funny kid. Like I became the entertainer at times, like in those like the moments of like downtime, like I did become the entertainer, and like that was a big part of my personality for a while until I felt like I lost it in depression. But I'm getting it all back now. It's like it's slowly coming back. Good. Yeah, like it's just because now I can be present, and like tune in on the moment, so I can make those like quick snap, quick fire jokes in the moment, and I'm glad I've got that back, because it's just fun, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and I can tell you do have a good sense of humor and are funny. So that has definitely come out.
Ah, good.
In this conversation. So tell us whatever you want to share. Tell us a little bit about this documentary, Breaking Through PTSD with Psychedelics. What's the deal with that?
Okay. I was doing an interview. I signed up to do some extra work just in January last year, maybe February No, it was after the trip. January, February, March. It's probably like April last year. And to get this job, I had to do a 1-minute interview and send it off to my agency. And they would, see if I just had to talk about myself. And I talked about psychedelics, classic. And
nice.
One of the guys who was watching it, who was involved in like picking the actors or the people who come on to do this advert that they wanted doing, which was ironically for this uni lad thing over here, and it's for the military. So I was actually going to be part of an advertising campaign unknowingly. Anyway, I didn't get the role, but he listened to the story and he was like, wow, I'm an independent filmmaker. I do short films on people with inspiring stories, and I would love to just, come and join you for some interviews and listen to your story. And his name's Dan Lufton. And yeah, he came over and we chatted, and I was like, yeah, it's good to get the story out there. Like, people who used to know me, I guess, like there was always like a bit of a narcissistic wound where I wanted to kind of, like get my story out there, like be a center of attention. But now that I've done the work, it's like, wow, it's really not about that. It's just about helping other people find their way to it. And yeah, we just worked together, and over the space of, I guess, almost a year, because lockdown and everything came in, he followed like my journey, a little like one-to-one sort of interviews on what had happened. And then he's also got Ben Sessa is speaking on there, who's he's a big name. And also my mushroom dealer, he's on there. What a legend.
A legend, right.
Yeah. And yeah, we put it together and just tried to give a really honest account of like my experience, and like none of it was re-recorded. Everything is just straight off the back, and I didn't stop anything, or I didn't try and, I was just honestly trying to answer questions that he'd have for me, like from what felt true. And I didn't have a lot of the language back then to even describe what had just happened, but I try my best, and I think it comes across in just in a bit of a different way than a lot of the documentaries have. It's small. It's like, it's a lot smaller than the big documentaries, but it's nice. I think it's humble, if I may say so myself. And I watched the trailer. There's a short trailer out there, and I'll put a link to it in the text here on the podcast. But I mean, in the short minute, trailer, and the short time you were talking, even when it first started off, I was like, oh my gosh, is that guy? Because you sounded so natural. Yeah. And at the same time, the BBC News picked up my story as well. So I was on the BBC Breakfast News channel, like one of the first sort of news reports where they actually allowed someone to kind of talk positively about using mushrooms for therapy.
Nice.
And that's when I got picked up with drug science as well. So I became a veteran advocate for the Medical Psychedelics Working Group for Drug Science. And I was also put in contact with a guy called Keith Abraham, who's now my CEO at Heroic Hearts Project UK. He's like the least CEO-y person, but he's great.
Right.
He's got his head screwed on so well. And yeah, we're just building this amazing team now. And so the Heroic Hearts Project picks up veterans in the UK who need psychedelic therapy, and then because of our stupid drug laws, we have to go and journey to somewhere like Peru or Amsterdam, and then people get their healing out of the country, and then they also get like a lot of their integration and stuff at these centers abroad. But then a lot of that, we're creating a network of integration coaches in the UK with Sarah Tai, who's an amazing integration / therapist in this space. She's trained a lot of people already for a lot of these clinical trials. And we're just growing, and people are just, the stories from veterans are always so powerful, especially if you can completely do the work, and you can draw strength from, everything. There's a lot to be uncovered. And then you've just got the network of, what it's like, the network of veterans is, if someone goes missing at the bottom of the country, someone at the top of the country they'll know that person's missing, because everyone's so interconnected. So there's a lot of, I guess, power in the community, but it's yet to be sort of recognized and worked with in a nice, correct way, in my eyes. I think it's already amazing, the charities and stuff that we already have, but I think Heroic Hearts is really going to go places. Our research is going to be open. We're not hiding, anyone will be able to use it. Heroic Hearts, it all started from Heroic Hearts USA, Jesse Gold over there, and now Canada also starting Heroic Hearts. So we're now beginning to, create studies which are across continents, which is just crazy good. And just other stuff. We've got we're really trying to put some pressure on the government and appeal for compassionate access, so people who are on the verge of taking their lives, like, can we have a compassionate access for 10 veterans to have this like treatment here in the UK instead of, you know, it's COVID times, like they can barely travel as it is.
Right.
Isn't there like a moral justification to give people this healing medicine?
Yeah.
And then maybe that will be our foot in the door. Who knows? But a lot of exciting things happening.
Yeah, a lot of great things you're doing there. That's really, you know, I'm grateful to you for all the effort you're putting into this and all the work, not just from getting the word out there, but integration coaching and working with Heroic Hearts. It's really fantastic.
It's a big, like, such a team effort. It always sounds like I'm listing off a lot of things that I'm doing, but you know, it's as and when we can, you know, for me, like come away from my studies and just give an hour here or give an hour there. And
yeah,
it's just, it's finding that mental space. And then when you have it, just working as fast as you can for the organization.
Excellent. Well, what else do you want? Is there anything I didn't ask? Anything else still on your mind that you want to get out there?
Oh, no, not yet. I don't think so. I think we've covered everything.
Okay.
But yeah, just like we said earlier, if anyone's thinking about this route, like spend time with yourself before. Like ask yourself all the questions, like all, you know, read spiritual teachings, everything like this. Surround yourself by nice people, even if it is on the internet. Start putting yourself in the position that you can see yourself on the other side of something like this happening. Yeah. And then you're doing the homework before you have the big journey, and then you're in so much better hands. And yeah, just the people who are working in this space, like I admire you and well done for going against the grain with this. I know it's hard. It's sometimes can be a lonely journey, but God, is it an amazing one, and I can't wait for so many other people to start having their breakthroughs, and if they do come, but don't, you know.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Guy. That was just really raw and good information, and I really appreciate it. So thank you so much for coming here on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, man.
Yeah, respect. Absolutely. That concludes this edition of the Stoned Ape Reports. Thank you for listening. Please follow us on Instagram at Stoned Ape Comedy and subscribe to our newsletter at www.stonedapecomedy.com. Again, thanks for listening, and catch you next time, Stoned Apes.